A brand new CEO walks into a failing factory, and a single dad steps in her way with a chilling warning. Don't open that door. But when she does, the truth spills out. A hidden room sealed for 30 years, a secret ledger filled with broken promises, and a machine that could change everything. Just as hope rises, one shocking whisper at a gala shatters the room. Mommy says, "You're my daddy." Now scandals, betrayals, and a race against time threaten to destroy not just the company, but families and futures. What was locked away in that room? And will opening the wrong door save a community or tear it apart forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun barely reached the factory floor through grimy windows that hadn't been cleaned since the Reagan administration. Nora Caldwell's heels clicked against worn concrete as she followed the plant manager through rows of looms that groaned like old bones. Workers lifted their heads just long enough to size her up another Caldwell in a suit worth more than their monthly pay, this one in a skirt. Production's down 8% from last quarter. The plant manager's voice echoed off metal beams. But we're holding steady on, ma'am. A man stepped into their path. Broad shoulders filled out a faded work shirt, and his hands bore the scars of honest labor. His eyes held a steadiness that made Nora pause. Eli Brooks, head of maintenance. He extended a calloused hand. "Welcome to Caldwell Mills." His grip was firm but careful, like he was conscious of his strength. Behind him, a preteen girl with bright eyes and her father's quiet confidence watched from beside a tool cart. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." Nora glanced at the girl. "Take your daughter to work day? School's out for teacher planning." Layla knows to stay clear of the machines. He touched his daughter's shoulder. "She's got more sense than most adults I know." The plant manager cleared his throat. "We should continue the tour, Ms. Caldwell." The boardroom, "I'd like to see everything, including the old wing." The manager's face went pale. "That section's been closed for decades. Safety concerns. If it's part of my company, I need to see it." Eli stepped forward. "I'll take you." They walked deeper into the building, where fluorescent lights gave way to bare bulbs strung like tired Christmas decorations. The air grew thick with dust and something else, the weight of years pressing down through the rafters. Layla trailed behind, her sneakers silent on the concrete. "Your father used to walk these halls every morning," Eli said. "Knew every worker by name. That was a long time ago. Not so long that folks have forgotten." They turned a corner into a hallway that time had abandoned. Peeling paint revealed layers of decades like tree rings. Pipes leaked rust-colored condensation that had stained the walls in patterns that looked almost deliberate. At the corridor's end stood a door that didn't belong. While everything else had surrendered to decay, this door remained defiant, its yellow paint flaking but bright, like sunflowers fighting through drought. A chain wrapped around the handle, its lock seized with rust. Eli stopped, his shoulders tensed. "Don't open that door." The words landed heavy in the stale air. Layla moved closer to her father. "Why?" Nora studied the door. No signs, no warnings, just that aggressive yellow against the gray decay. The founder left specific instructions, said to keep it sealed until the right Caldwell came along. The right Caldwell? Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks. "And who decides that? You? Not my decision to make." Eli's jaw tightened. "But that door's been locked for 30 years. Maybe there's wisdom in leaving it be, or maybe there's wisdom in finally opening it." Nora pulled out her phone, activating its flashlight. "Do you have bolt cutters?" "Miss Caldwell? That's CEO Caldwell? And I asked you a question." Eli held her gaze for a long moment. Then he pulled a multi-tool from his belt, flipped open the wire cutters, and worked at the chain's weakest link. Metal snapped like breaking bones. The chain fell away in a cascade of rust flakes. Nora grasped the handle. The door resisted, then gave way with a groan that echoed through empty halls. Air rushed out, not stale but sweet, carrying the scent of cedar and old paper, like her grandmother's hope chest. Her phone light swept across the room. A loom sat in the center, different from anything on the factory floor, smaller, more intricate, with attachments she'd never seen in 40 years around textiles. Wooden crates lined the walls, and on a desk that looked hand-carved, leather-bound ledgers lay stacked beside bundles of letters tied with ribbon that had once been white. "Lord have mercy," Eli whispered. Nora picked up the top ledger. Founders Promise Trust was embossed in gold lettering that still caught the light. Inside, columns of numbers in fountain pen, ink, and names, so many names. Workers' children who never got to college, families who lost homes when wages were cut, promises made and broken, all catalogued in perfect penmanship. "Daddy?" Layla's voice was small. "Should we be in here?" Eli didn't answer. He stood transfixed by the loom, running his fingers along its frame like he was reading Braille. "This mechanism." He crouched, examining the attachments. "It's a complete redesign of the thread feed system. This could reduce waste by—" He looked up at Nora. "This could change everything." Nora picked up a bundle of letters. The top envelope read, "To the child I could not claim yet." Her hands trembled as she set it down unopened. "The founder left instructions," Eli said quietly, his earlier resistance crumbling. "Said only the right Caldwell would understand what to do with all this, would have the courage to do what needs doing. And you think I'm not the right Caldwell? I think your family's got debts that money can't pay." He stood, his eyes moving from the ledger to the letters to Nora's face. "Question is whether you're ready to see the bill." The room held its breath around them, dust motes floating like witnesses in the shaft of light from the open door. That evening, long after the last shift whistle, Nora sat hunched over the ledgers at the oak table that had belonged to her grandfather. The office lights cast pools of amber across pages that shouldn't exist, columns of numbers that told a story of betrayal wrapped in neat accounting. $3 million. That's what the Founders Promise Trust showed, allocated in 1,954 for educational advancement and wage restoration for colored workers. Untouched. Gathering interest for decades while families scraped by on wages that never rose with the cost of living. She traced the entries with her finger. Names she recognized, grandchildren and great-grandchildren still working the mill floor. The Washingtons, the Johnsons, the Freeman family who'd lost 3 sons to Vietnam while their daughters cleaned the executive offices for pennies. The sustainable fabric process sprawled across another ledger in meticulous diagrams. Thread tension coefficients. Waste reduction calculations showing 70% less material loss. Production costs that would have revolutionized the industry in the 50s, let alone now. All of it locked away while competitors gradually ate their market share. A soft knock interrupted her spiral into the past. "Come in." Eli entered with Layla trailing behind, her backpack heavy with textbooks. The girl settled into a corner chair without being asked, pulling out math homework like she'd done this routine before. "Security said you were still here." Eli approached the table, his work boots quiet on the thick carpet. "Look at this." Nora turned the ledger toward him. "Your founder didn't just have ideas, he had solutions. This fabric process alone could have saved us from 20 years of decline." "May I?" Eli gestured at the chair across from her. She nodded. He sat carefully, like the furniture might break under the weight of what they were discussing. "Mr. Caldwell, the founder. Not your father. He came to me 15 years ago. I was just a maintenance apprentice. But he saw something in me." Eli's voice carried the reverence of confession. "Handed me that key himself. Said to keep that door locked until a Caldwell came along who'd do right by what was inside." 15 years? Nora looked up from the papers. "You've been sitting on this for 15 years? He was specific about waiting, said his son, your father, would bury it all, that the board would rather see the mill shuttered than honor these obligations." From her corner, Layla's pencil scratched against paper, a metronome keeping time with their conversation. Nora picked up one of the letter bundles. These references to the child I could not claim, do you know what that means? I have my suspicions. Eli glanced at his daughter, then back to Nora. But suspicions aren't facts, and facts are what you'll need if you're thinking of taking this to the board. I have to take it to them. This trust, these processes, they could save the mill, could destroy it too. Eli leaned forward. That board's got men who've spent careers maintaining the story that this company's struggles are about foreign competition and labor costs. You show them proof that we've been sitting on salvation for decades because someone didn't want to pay black workers fairly. Then they'll have to face the truth. The truth? Eli's laugh held no humor. Ms. Caldwell, with respect, the truth is whatever keeps their portfolios healthy. And this, he gestured at the ledgers, this rewrites a century of Caldwell family history, from benefactors to what we were. Nora closed the ledger. What we are, if we don't act on this. The fluorescent light above them flickered, throwing shadows that danced across the founder's careful handwriting. Daddy? Layla looked up from her homework. Is Ms. Caldwell in trouble? No, baby. Just trying to solve a complicated problem. Like when you fixed the number 3 loom? Everyone said it couldn't be done, but you found a way. Eli's face softened. Something like that. Nora watched the exchange, saw the weight Eli carried, not just of knowledge, but of raising this bright child alone in a town where opportunities were scarce. The trust money could change everything for families like his. For Layla, the board meets Friday. Nora started gathering the documents. I'll need you there. You're the only witness to the founders' actual wishes. They won't want to hear from me, then they'll have to get used to disappointment. She locked the ledgers in her desk drawer. Because I'm not asking their permission, I'm informing them of our new direction. Eli stood, calling softly to Layla to pack up. As they reached the door, he turned back. That yellow paint on the door? I refreshed it myself every 5 years. The founder asked me to. Said it was supposed to be bright enough that no one could claim they didn't see it. But it was locked. Locks only stop people who choose to be stopped. He held her gaze. You chose different today. Question is whether you'll keep choosing different when they push back. The lights flickered again, and somewhere in the building's bones, old pipes groaned like they were trying to speak. After Eli and Layla left, Nora sat alone, with the weight of discovery. Outside her window, the mill sprawled under failing streetlights, and beyond that, the town that lived or died by decisions made in rooms like this one. She pulled out the bundle of letters again, but didn't open them. Not yet. Some truths demanded witnesses. The morning sun caught the dust motes dancing through the weave room as Nora adjusted her hard hat. Eli walked beside her, pointing out the machinery that kept Caldwell Mills breathing barely. Number 4 has been down since Tuesday. He nodded toward a silent loom. Parts are on back order. Been on back order since March. Workers glanced up from their stations. Some nodded acknowledgement. Others watched with the wariness of people who'd seen too many executives tour the floor and change nothing. Could the prototype process work with our existing equipment? Nora asked, loud enough for nearby workers to hear. With modifications, yes. The founder designed it to retrofit what we already have. A woman at the cutting table, her name tag read. Rosa looked up sharply. What prototype? Nora stepped closer to the cutting station. The founder left behind plans. A new fabric process that uses less water, creates less waste. Could put us ahead of the sustainability curve. Plans? Rosa's laugh was brittle. We've been hearing about plans for 20 years. These are different. They've been locked away. Nora met the woman's skeptical gaze. Hidden, actually. But we found them yesterday. More workers drifted closer, pretending to check gauges and adjust settings while they listened. Found them where? Asked a younger man running the dye station. In a sealed room. The founder left instructions and funding to implement them. Funding? Rosa set down her cutting tool. Then why are we running skeleton crews? Why's my sister working 3 jobs? Because we cut her hours. Eli stepped forward. Because the funding comes with conditions, fair wage requirements, scholarship programs, things the board hasn't been eager to honor. The workers exchanged glances, hope wrestling with decades of disappointment. "You're really going to fight for this?" Rosa asked Nora directly. "I'm going to do more than fight. I'm going to win." The floor stayed quiet for a moment. Then Rosa nodded slowly and returned to her cutting, but her shoulders seemed less hunched, her movements less resigned. As they continued the tour, more workers began making eye contact, even offering tentative smiles. By the time Nora and Eli reached the loading dock, word had spread through the entire floor. The mill hummed with something more than machinery possibility. That evening, the Civic Hall glowed with string lights and good intentions. The annual Caldwell Foundation Charity Gala drew the town's elite, such as they were local business owners, council members, and old families whose names graced street signs and memorial plaques. Nora smoothed her navy dress and stepped to the microphone. Crystal glasses caught the light like promises waiting to be kept. "For 100 years, Caldwell Mills has been the heartbeat of this town," she began. "Today I'm here to tell you that heartbeat is about to get stronger." She spoke of innovation and sustainability, of contracts waiting to be won. She didn't mention the locked room or the hidden trust. Not yet. Those revelations needed board approval first. But she painted a picture of renewal that had the crowd leaning forward, champagne forgotten. "We're not just saving jobs. We're creating a model for American manufacturing that honors both profit and people." Applause rippled through the hall. Cliff Caldwell, immaculate in his charcoal suit, raised his glass from the head table, though his smile never reached his eyes. The quartet struck up again Pachelbel's canon, safe and soothing. Nora stepped down from the podium, accepting handshakes and careful encouragement. She noticed Marisol Reyes near the service entrance, supervising the catering staff in her formal black uniform. Their eyes met briefly. Marisol looked away. The crowd had begun to disperse into comfortable clusters when movement near the head table drew attention. A young man in an ill-fitting blazer walked toward Cliff with the determination of someone who'd practiced this moment. Mateo Reyes, Marisol's son. The boy's hands trembled as he stopped in front of the board chairman. The violin music continued, but conversations began dying like flames deprived of oxygen. Mateo's voice cracked, barely audible at first. Then, finding courage in terror, he spoke clearly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The quartet's bows froze mid-stroke. Champagne flutes halted halfway to lips. The Civic Hall became a tableau of suspended disbelief. Cliff's face drained of color, his practiced composure crumbling like old mortar. His wife grabbed the edge of the table, her knuckles white against the linen. "What did you say?" Cliff's voice came out strangled. Before Mateo could repeat himself, Marisol burst through the crowd, her formal composure shattered. "Mateo, no, please." She grabbed her son's arm, trying to pull him away. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. He's confused." "I'm not confused, Mom." Mateo stood firm, though tears threatened. "You told me. Last week, when I asked why we don't have any pictures of my father, you said he was standing right there in the big house, and you pointed at—" "Stop." Marisol's voice broke. "Please, mijo, just stop." But the damage was done. Every eye in the Civic Hall fixed on the tableau, the millionaire chairman, the housekeeper in her uniform, and the boy suspended between two worlds. Murmurs rose like floodwater, voices overlapping in speculation and scandal. Someone's phone flashed a photo captured, then another. Cliff stood slowly, his jaw working soundlessly. He looked at Mateo, really looked at him, and Nora saw recognition dawn in his eyes. The boy had his jawline, his widow's peak. The board chairman turned and walked out without a word, leaving his wife sitting alone at the head table, her pearls catching the light like tears. The gala dissolved into whispered clusters and hasty departures. Nora tried to salvage what she could, thanking donors and pretending the earth hadn't shifted beneath their feet. But within 20 minutes, The civic hall had emptied of everyone except staff. She found Marisol in the kitchen, sitting on a metal stool with her face in her hands. The woman's shoulders shook with silent sobs. "Mrs. Reyes, he wasn't supposed to say anything." Marisol's voice came muffled through her fingers. "I only told him because he kept asking, every day, asking why other kids had fathers and he didn't." Before Nora could respond, Cliff's hand gripped her elbow. "We need to talk. Now." He steered her toward the service hallway, his fingers digging into her arm. Once they were alone among the mops and cleaning supplies, he released her and paced like a caged animal. "That boy's claim is nonsense. Pure fantasy from a desperate woman trying to— Cliff, I saw your face. You recognized him." "I recognized nothing." His voice dropped to a hiss. "And neither did you. This dies tonight, understood? No gossip, no investigation, nothing. The letters in the founder's room mention an unclaimed heir. If Mateo is— there is no heir, there are no letters worth considering. And if you're smart, you'll forget that room exists." Nora straightened. "I can't do that. Can't. Or won't." Cliff's face flushed red. "Don't forget who put you in that CEO chair, cousin. The board listens to me." He stormed out, leaving Nora alone among the industrial shelving and the smell of bleach. She returned to find Marisol still in the kitchen, now standing and wringing a dish towel. "Please, Miss Caldwell." The woman's dignity had cracked, but not broken. "Don't let this ruin Mateo's future. He's worked so hard, perfect grades, first chair violin. He has a chance at the state scholarship if—" her voice caught. "If this doesn't destroy everything. Mrs. Reyes, I need to understand what happened. The truth." Marisol's hand stilled on the towel. "The truth is I was young and foolish. Mr. Cliff was different then, or maybe I just wanted to believe he was. When I told him about the baby, he gave me money for medical expenses and said it would be best for everyone if I took care of it. I kept the money but had Mateo anyway. Been cleaning his house ever since, watching him pretend we don't exist." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere, a faucet dripped. "I never asked for anything. Never would have. But Mateo, he deserves to know where he comes from." By morning, the news had spread through town like kudzu. Nora heard the whispers before she even reached the mill at the gas station, through the coffee shop window, in the pointed silence that fell when she entered the lobby. The workers on the floor weren't whispering. They were talking openly, voices carrying over the machinery. Always knew something wasn't right about how Cliff treated Marisol. That boy's got Caldwell written all over his face. Wonder if this changes things. With the trust money. Nora had barely settled at her desk when Cliff burst through her door without knocking. His usual polish had cracked tie askew, hair uncombed, eyes wild. "What have you done?" "I haven't done anything. Your son. He is not my son." Cliff slammed both palms on her desk. "And you're going to make that clear to everyone. Today. Call a meeting, send a memo, I don't care how you do it. I'm not lying for you, Cliff. Then you'll bury that ledger and forget this heir nonsense. The founder's stipulations are suggestions, not law." Nora pulled out the photocopy she'd made. "Actually, they're quite specific. The trust shall be activated only upon the public acknowledgement of all heirs, regardless of circumstance or station." Cliff snatched the paper, scanning it with growing fury. "This is worthless. 100 years old, no legal standing, our lawyers might disagree." "Your lawyers?" "You mean my lawyers. Board lawyers." He crumpled the photocopy. "You have 48 hours to make this disappear, or I'll call an emergency board meeting to discuss your fitness for leadership, mental stability concerns, inability to separate fantasy from reality. Amazing how quickly a reputation can crumble." He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Nora sat in the sudden silence, hands trembling. Everything she'd worked for, everything the mill workers needed, it all balanced on a knife's edge. By afternoon, She couldn't stand the office walls anymore. She grabbed her keys and fled to her car, needing space to think. But instead of driving, she sat in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, while her chest tightened with frustration and fear. A gentle tap on the window made her jump. Eli stood outside, concern creasing his weathered face. She rolled down the window. "Rough morning?" A laugh escaped her, bitter and short. "You could say that. Mind if I sit?" He gestured to the passenger side. She unlocked the door. He settled in, filling the space with the scent of machine oil and coffee. "Heard Cliff paid you a visit. Man was red as a brick when he left. He wants me to bury everything, pretend Mateo doesn't exist, forget the trust requirements, threaten my job if I don't." Eli was quiet for a moment, studying the dashboard. "My wife used to say that truth is like water, it always finds a way through, no matter how many walls you build. Your wife sounds wise." She was. He turned to face her. "Look, I know you're scared, but I've watched you these past days. You're not the type to run from hard things. This could cost me everything, or it could free everyone. That's what truth does, brings freedom. Even when it hurts at first." He paused. "That boy deserves acknowledgement. The workers deserve that trust money. And Cliff, he deserves the chance to make things right, even if he has to be dragged to it. The board won't support me." "Then make them. You've got the founder's own words. You've got the moral high ground, and you've got people who'll stand with you. People like you, people like me." The boardroom smelled of leather and old coffee. Nora spread the documents across the polished mahogany table, ledger pages, prototype sketches, the founder's letters, yellowed with age. 9 board members stared back at her, their faces carved from stone. "This changes everything," she began. "The founders promised trust, contains over $3 million, adjusted for inflation. It's specifically earmarked for wage equity, scholarships, and apprenticeship programs." Cliff leaned back in his chair. "These are suggestions from a dead man. Nothing more. They're legal documents." Nora tapped the ledger. "Signed, witnessed, and filed with the county." Harold Winters, the oldest board member, picked up one of the letters with 2 fingers, as if it might stain his suit. Sentimental nonsense. The founder was clearly emotional when he wrote these. Emotional about doing right by his workers. "Workers who are long dead," Harold replied. "Their descendants have no claim. Actually, may I?" A smooth voice cut through the tension. Victor Hale sat at the far end, invited as a consultant by Cliff. His silver hair caught the light as he stood, buttoning his Italian suit jacket. "Ms. Caldwell, I admire your passion. But passion doesn't pay bills." He moved to the window, gazing out at the mill below. "I'm prepared to offer $20 million for the entire operation. Cash. The board members would see substantial returns, and we could provide generous severance packages for the workers. Before you shut it down." Victor turned, smiling. "Consolidation is simply good business. That building could be converted to luxury lofts. The land alone is worth, these aren't just workers, they're families. Communities. Which is why severance packages, 6 months' pay doesn't replace a livelihood." Nora's voice rose. "It doesn't honor a century of loyalty. Loyalty doesn't appear on balance sheets. Maybe that's the problem." The room fell silent. Eli stood against the back wall, arms crossed, a quiet pillar of support. Their eyes met briefly enough for her to straighten her spine. Margaret Chen, the sole woman on the board besides Nora, finally spoke. "What about this prototype? Could it actually work?" Nora pulled out Eli's preliminary analysis. The sustainable fabric process could reduce costs by 30% while opening new markets. Government contracts prioritize environmental standards now. "Could," Cliff emphasized, "might, maybe. We're supposed to risk everything on 100-year-old sketches? We're supposed to honor our obligations. Our obligation is to shareholders. Our obligation is to do what's right." Victor laughed, soft and condescending. How refreshing. "But righteousness doesn't keep companies afloat. The debate raged for 3 more hours. Nora fielded every objection, countered every dismissal. Eli never spoke but never left, his presence a reminder that real workers stood behind her words. Finally, Harold called for a vote. All in favor of tabling this matter pending further review? 7 hands rose. Only Margaret hesitated before joining them. Motion carried, Harold announced. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Translation: they'd stall until she gave up or they found a way to force her out. Nora gathered her papers with steady hands, refusing to show defeat. As board members filed out, Margaret touched her shoulder. "You're not wrong," she whispered, "but being right isn't always enough." The boardroom emptied except for Nora and Eli. She slumped in her chair. "That went well," Eli said dryly. Despite everything, she almost smiled. "You stayed. Said I would. 3 hours of them attacking everything I presented. 3 hours of you not backing down." He moved closer. "Layla's making spaghetti tonight, her grandmother's recipe. You should come." "I couldn't impose." "You're not. She insists on setting a place for you anyway. Something about needing to show you her science project." The Brooks home sat on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The house was small but meticulously maintained, fresh paint on the shutters, flowers in window boxes. Inside, it smelled like garlic and basil. Layla bounced on her toes when they entered. "Ms. Caldwell, did Dad tell you about my project?" "He mentioned it. Come see." The kitchen table had been cleared, except for a detailed model made from cardboard and string. Layla had recreated the prototype loom attachment, complete with moving parts. "I used the sketches from the photos Dad took. See how the thread feeds through here? It reduces waste by redirecting excess fibers back into the weave." Her hands moved eagerly, demonstrating each function. "If we could build this full scale, we could prove it works before the board meets again." Nora studied the model, amazed at its accuracy. "This is brilliant, Layla. Dad helped with the measurements, but I figured out how to make the parts move using bicycle chain links. She's been working on it all week," Eli said, stirring sauce on the stove. "Barely slept." "Because it matters." Layla looked up at Nora. "My friend Jenny's dad got laid off from the plant last year. They had to move. If this works, maybe families can stay together." The simple truth of it, a 12-year-old understanding what board members worth millions couldn't grasp, made Nora's throat tight. They ate spaghetti on mismatched plates, talking about anything except the mill. Layla described her robotics club. Eli shared stories from his army days, and for an hour, Nora remembered what it felt like to be part of something warm and uncomplicated. As she helped clear dishes, Eli touched her elbow. "You did good today." "I failed." "You stood up. That's not failing." He handed her a dish towel. "Truth needs time to work." Like water through stone. Layla appeared with a covered plate. "Brownies for the road. Mom's recipe." She noticed Eli's flinch at the mention, the quick sadness that crossed his face. "Thank you," Nora said softly, "for all of this." That night, driving home through empty streets, she felt something shift. Not victory, not yet. But determination, crystallizing into something harder, sharper. The board thought they'd won with their delay. They had no idea what she was capable of when she had something worth fighting for. The newspaper hit Nora's doorstep with a thud that seemed to echo through her entire house. The headline screamed across the front page, "Caldwell Air Scandal Rocks Struggling Mill." Below it, a grainy photo from the gala Mateo's face, turned up toward Cliff, caught mid-whisper. Her phone had been ringing since 5:30. She'd ignored every call. By the time she reached the mill, reporters clustered at the gates like vultures. Cameras swung toward her car. She kept her eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel, and drove through without acknowledging the shouted questions. Inside the plant, the atmosphere had shifted overnight. Workers huddled in groups, conversations dying when she passed. Fear hung in the air, not of her, but of what came next. pink slips, closed doors, moving vans. She found Eli in the break room, pouring coffee for a group of worried line workers. "My mortgage is due next week," Betty from packaging was saying. "If this place closes, nobody's closing anything," Nora interrupted. Every face turned to her. "I know what the papers are saying. I know you're scared. But this mill has survived 100 years. We're not giving up now." "Easy to say when you're not living paycheck to paycheck," someone muttered. "You're right." Nora moved closer to the group. "I don't know what it's like to wonder if I can feed my family next week, but I know what it's like to fight for something everyone says is impossible, and I'm fighting for this place, for all of you." Betty studied her face. "The Caldwells never fought for us before." "I'm not them." A long pause. Then Betty nodded slowly. "We'll see." 20 minutes later, Nora's office held an unlikely gathering. Eli stood by the window, watching the reporters. Pastor Ruth sat straight-backed in a leather chair, her presence somehow making the corporate space feel warmer. Marisol perched on the edge of another chair, hands twisted in her lap. "They're calling my son names," Marisol whispered. "At school, online." "I never wanted—" "This isn't your fault," Pastor Ruth said firmly. "Secrets have a way of finding daylight. Better to walk through it with dignity than hide in shame." Nora spread the ledger across her desk. "There's something you all need to see." She pointed to the footnote, written in fading ink but still legible. Eli read it aloud. "The Founders Promise Trust shall activate only upon the public acknowledgement of all heirs bearing Caldwell blood, regardless of circumstance or station." Silence stretched between them. "All heirs," Pastor Ruth repeated. The founder knew. Even then, he knew there would be children denied their birthright. "Cliff will never admit it publicly," Marisol said. "He's built his whole life on being the perfect Caldwell son." "Then we need to show him what he stands to lose," Nora said. "Not just money, legacy. The chance to be remembered for something more than abandoning his child." Eli turned from the window. "The workers are organizing a meeting. Tonight. They want answers about their jobs. Good. We'll give them answers. And hope." "Hope based on what?" Marisol's voice cracked. "My son's humiliation? Cliff's conscience suddenly appearing after 17 years?" Pastor Ruth reached over and took Marisol's hand. "Hope based on truth being stronger than lies. Justice being worth more than comfort. Your boy showed courage most grown men lack. Don't you dare let him think he did wrong." Marisol's tears came then, silent but steady. Nora pulled out the prototype plans. "Eli, how fast can we get a working model built?" "With the right team? 2 weeks. Maybe less. Do it. Use whoever you need. We'll show the board and the town exactly what we're fighting for." "What about Victor Hale?" Eli asked. "He's been meeting with board members individually. Saw Harold's car at his hotel yesterday. Let him scheme. We have something he doesn't." "What's that?" "We have each other." Pastor Ruth stood. "I'll gather the church council. We've been praying for this town's healing for years. Maybe God's answering in ways we didn't expect." After they left, Nora walked alone through the plant. The afternoon shift hummed with mechanical rhythm, looms clacking, threads spinning, workers moving in practiced patterns. 3 generations of families had worked these floors, built lives on these wages, buried parents who'd given decades to Caldwell Mills. She found herself standing before the yellow door again. The paint seemed brighter in the fading sunlight that slanted through high windows. Such a small thing, a door. A choice to open it, but every choice created ripples. The founder had known. Had prepared for this moment, even while trapped in his own generation's prejudices. He'd hidden the truth, but also preserved it. Created a mechanism for justice that required courage to activate. Her phone buzzed. "Cliff, you've destroyed everything," he snarled. "My reputation, my marriage, everything I've built. You destroyed it 17 years ago when you walked away from Marisol. She was the maid. She was a person. Mateo is your son. I'll fight this, every step. Then you'll lose everything instead of just your pride." She hung up. The sun dipped lower, painting the yellow door gold. Tomorrow would bring more reporters, more pressure, more threats. But tonight, she'd stand before worried workers and tell them the truth. Salvation required sacrifice. Justice demanded acknowledgement. And sometimes, the doors we're warned not to open are exactly the ones that need opening most. The morning shift whistle cut through dawn fog as Nora waited on the plant floor. Workers filed past, avoiding eye contact. Conversations died when she appeared. The newspaper headlines had done their damage. Everyone knew about Mateo, about the trust, about the board's resistance. Eli emerged from the maintenance corridor, toolbox in hand. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Rough night?" Layla couldn't sleep, kept asking if we'd have to move. He set down the toolbox, had to tell her I didn't know. The admission hung between them. Around them, looms clattered to life, but the usual rhythm felt hollow. Workers moved through motions, going through habits that might not matter next month. "Gather everyone," Nora said. "Main floor, 10 minutes." Word spread. They came reluctantly, the young ones bold enough to show curiosity, the older ones wearing skepticism like armor. Betty stood with arms crossed. Harold from shipping leaned against a support beam, already shaking his head. Nora climbed onto a shipping crate. No podium, no prepared remarks. Just her, worn jeans she'd changed into that morning, and truth. "You've heard rumors. Most are probably true. The mill's in trouble. The board wants to sell. Victor Hale wants to shut us down and sell the land." She let that sink in. "But we found something in that sealed room. A prototype that could change everything." "Pretty words won't pay mortgages," Harold called out. "You're right, but working equipment might." She gestured to Eli. "We're starting a pilot program. Today. Small scale. But if it works when it works, we can prove to buyers that Caldwell Mills has a future." "With what workers?" Betty asked. "Half of us can barely work the current machines. That's why we're starting with volunteers, younger workers who want to learn." Nora paused. "And some special consultants from the middle school science club." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eli stepped forward. "My daughter Layla's been studying the prototype specs. Her science class has ideas about efficiency improvements. They'll work afternoons, supervised." "You want kids running equipment?" Harold's voice pitched higher. "I want kids learning what their parents and grandparents built." Nora shot back. "I want them seeing a future here." The main door burst open. Layla rushed in, backpack bouncing, followed by 6 other students. Their teacher, Mrs. Chen, brought up the rear, looking apologetic. "Dad," Layla called. "We finished the calculations. The thread tension should be—" She stopped, noticing the crowd. Her voice dropped. "Sorry, we're early." "Perfect timing," Nora said. She climbed down from the crate. "Who wants to help these kids prove we're worth saving?" Silence stretched. Then Marcus, barely 22, raised his hand. "I'll try." "Me too," said Isabella from quality control. One by one, younger workers stepped forward. 7 volunteers, not many, but enough. Eli led them to the prototype, a modified loom with the founder's attachment, rebuilt from his hidden specifications. The mechanism looked deceptively simple, a series of gears and guides that reduced waste thread by 40% while strengthening the weave. The founder designed this in 1963, Eli explained. Never implemented it. The ledger suggests he feared it would reduce the workforce. "Would it?" Marcus asked. "No. It would let us compete for contracts we can't touch now. Sustainable fabric, military-grade efficiency. We'd need more workers, not fewer." Layla and her classmates circled the machine, notebooks out. One boy, Timothy, dropped to his knees, studying the gear mechanism. "Mr. Brooks, what if we adjusted the angle here? Physics says, show me." And they were off. Kids and young workers huddled together, sketching modifications on scrap paper. Layla calculated thread speeds, while Isabella tested fabric samples. The science teacher helped translate between academic theory and practical application. The older workers watched from a distance. Some scoffed and walked away, but others lingered. "Look at that," Betty murmured as Layla showed Marcus how to reduce friction on the guide wheel. "When's the last time anyone got excited about equipment here?" By lunch, they'd produced their first successful yard of fabric. It wasn't perfect, the edges needed work, the tension required constant adjustment, but it was cleaner, stronger, and used significantly less raw material than the standard process. The lunch whistle blew. Workers headed for the break room, but the pilot team stayed. Layla shared her sandwich with Timothy while they debated gear ratios. Marcus taught Isabella how to read the tension gauges Eli had installed. "Never seen anything like it," said James, an older worker who'd stayed to watch. He clapped Eli on the shoulder. "Your girl's got your brain. Got her mother's heart too," Eli said quietly, always believing things can be better. The afternoon brought progress and setbacks in equal measure. The thread jammed. They fixed it. The tension slipped. They adjusted. Each failure taught them something new. The science club kids treated each problem like a puzzle, their enthusiasm infectious. "Mrs. Caldwell," Timothy asked during a break, "why didn't anyone try this before?" Nora considered her words carefully. "Sometimes people get comfortable with the way things are. Even when it's not working, change is scary." "But the math works," Layla insisted. "The prototype makes sense." "Not everything's about math, sweetheart," Eli said. "Sometimes it's about courage." By shift end, they'd produced 12 yards of fabric. The quality exceeded current production standards. The waste reduction measured 38%. Workers gathered as the final test results came in. Even Harold stepped closer. "It actually works," someone whispered. "Course it works," Betty said. "Question is whether anyone upstairs cares." Nora held the fabric sample smooth, strong, sustainable. "They'll care. We'll make them care." That evening, she spread efficiency reports across her kitchen table. The numbers were better than she'd hoped. At this rate, they could fulfill a small contract within weeks, enough to prove viability, enough to counter Victor Hale's poison. Her phone rang. "Eli. Layla won't stop talking about tomorrow's adjustments. She's drawn up 3 different modification plans. Bring them all. We'll need every idea." "Nora," his voice softened. "Thank you for giving her something to believe in. She's giving all of us something to believe in." After they hung up, Nora stared at the reports. One day, one small success. But in that worn factory, among skeptical workers and eager children, something had shifted. Hope, fragile but real, had taken root. The church fellowship hall smelled of fresh coffee and old wood. Pastor Ruth had arranged folding chairs in a circle, no head table, no hierarchy, just neighbors facing neighbors. The overhead fluorescents flickered, casting uneven light on weathered faces. "Thank you for coming," Pastor Ruth began. Her voice carried the authority of decades spent shepherding this community. "Tonight, we speak truth, not to wound, but to heal." Nora sat between 2 empty chairs. She'd insisted on no special placement, though her navy blazer stood out among the work clothes and Sunday dresses. Workers filed in slowly. Betty, James, others she recognized from the floor. Some avoided eye contact, others nodded stiffly. The circle filled, 30 people, 40. The young stayed home, but the seniors came, those who remembered. "Who wants to start?" Pastor Ruth asked. Silence stretched until Agnes Wheeler, 83, raised a trembling hand. "Started at Caldwell Mills in 1957, 17 years old. They paid the white girls $2 more per day for the same work. When I asked why, the floor manager said I should be grateful they hired coloreds at all." The words hung heavy. Agnes continued. "Worked there 42 years, trained every new hire on my line, never made supervisor. They always found a reason. Too slow, Too pushy. Too something. Betty reached over, squeezed Agnes's hand. Samuel Morrison spoke next. 1973. I designed a more efficient loading system, saved the company thousands. My supervisor submitted it under his name. Got a bonus. I got nothing. They fired me in '81, said Dorothy Chen. Said I was stirring trouble. All I did was ask why the white workers got bathroom breaks whenever they needed, but we had to wait for scheduled times. Story after story. Each one a weight added to Nora's chest. She'd read numbers in ledgers, but these were lives. Decades of dignity denied, potential wasted. Marcus Williams, Vietnam veteran, described returning home to find his mill job given to someone else. Told me I'd been gone too long. 2 years serving my country was too long. My daughter, Eleanor started, then stopped. Tears traced lines down her dark cheeks. My daughter had the grades for college. The Founders Scholarship Program? They said it was for legacy families only. She works retail now. Brilliant girl, stocking shelves. Nora's own eyes burned. She'd benefited from those same scholarships. Never questioned who was excluded. Thomas Gray pulled out a yellowed pay stub. 1,969. Look at this. 60 hours that week. Paid for 40 because they classified us as seasonal, even though we worked year-round. The separate water fountain stayed until 1,971. Someone added, officially integrated, but everyone knew which one you were supposed to use. Pastor Ruth let each story breathe, never rushing, never dismissing. The hurt accumulated like sediment, layer upon layer of injustice. Finally, silence fell. All eyes turned to Nora. She stood slowly. I cannot undo what was done, cannot give back the years, the dignity, the opportunities stolen, her voice caught. But I can promise this. When we activate the Founders Trust, and we will activate it, the first funds go to wage audits. Back pay where we can prove discrimination. Scholarships for your grandchildren. Training programs with guaranteed promotions. Pretty words, Samuel said. Heard them before. You haven't heard them from me. Nora met his gaze. I stake my position on this. Either we make this right, or I walk away from Caldwell Mills entirely. Your cousin didn't come, Eleanor observed. Cliff's absence speaks volumes. Yes, it does. Pastor Ruth stood. Let's close with prayer. For truth to continue emerging, for hearts to soften, for justice to roll down like waters. Hands joined across the circle. Workers who'd avoided Nora now gripped her fingers. The prayer rose, simple and powerful. Afterward, people dispersed slowly. Some hugged, others just nodded and left. Agnes stopped beside Nora. Your grandfather knew. He had to know. Yes, he did. At least you're trying to make it right. Agnes patted Nora's arm. That's more than any Caldwell's done before. The hall emptied except for Nora, Eli, and Pastor Ruth cleaning up. They worked quietly, folding chairs, washing coffee cups. The mundane tasks felt sacred after what they'd witnessed. Church kitchens got more coffee, Pastor Ruth said. You two look like you need it. The kitchen was smaller, warmer. Nora sat at the scarred wooden table while Eli poured coffee from an ancient percolator. Pastor Ruth excused herself to check on the sanctuary. I never knew, Nora whispered. That's not an excuse. I should have known. You were a child when most of that happened. I was an adult when I took those scholarships. Never asked who couldn't apply. Eli sat across from her. Steam rose between them from the ceramic mugs. I've always been the outsider in my own family, Nora continued. The divorced one. The childless one. The one who cared too much about workers' conditions. They tolerated me, but I never really belonged. Maybe that's why you can see what they can't. What do you mean? God often works through outsiders. Moses was a stutterer. David was the youngest son. Mary was an unwed mother. Outsiders see what insiders miss. Nora wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I'm scared, Eli. Scared I'll fail them. Scared I'll become just another Caldwell who means well but changes nothing. You opened the door. That's a start. You told me not to. Part of me hoped you would anyway. He smiled slightly. Sometimes the right thing comes disguised as the dangerous thing. They sat in comfortable silence. The church's old bones creaked around them. Through the window, the parking lot lamp cast golden circles on empty asphalt. Your daughter's brilliant, Nora said eventually. That prototype work today, she sees solutions others miss. Gets that from her mother. Sarah always believed things could be better. Even at the end, she kept saying, "Promise me you'll keep hoping." Do you keep hoping? Trying to. Days like today help. They rinsed their mugs, turned off lights. In the parking lot, they paused beside their cars. "Thank you," Nora said, "for everything. We're just getting started." As she drove home, Nora felt the shift inside herself. The stories she'd heard weren't just history. They were present accountability, future responsibility. The weight of them pressed against her ribs, but somehow she felt lighter too. Truth did that, burdened and freed you simultaneously. The next morning, Janice Wu arrived at Nora's office, carrying 3 banker's boxes. She set them on the conference table with practiced efficiency, her navy suit crisp, despite the early hour. "I've been up since 4, Janice said, pulling out tabbed folders. "The more I dig, the more I find." Nora poured coffee from the pot she'd started at dawn. The mill hummed below them, first shift already running the pilot line. "Start from the beginning." Nora sat forward. "What makes you think the trust has legal teeth?" Janice opened the first folder. "Your great-grandfather was meticulous. Look here, bank records from 1952. He opened a separate account, funded it personally, never touched it. The interest alone is now worth millions. Why hide it? The board would have killed it. But he structured it as a personal trust with the company as beneficiary, contingent on specific conditions being met." Janice traced her finger down columns of numbers. "See these quarterly deposits? They match his personal withdrawals exactly. He was building this for decades. Page after page revealed the careful architecture of conscience. Money moved through hidden channels, waiting. The letters reference all heirs of blood, not just legitimate ones," Janice continued. "Under current law, that includes Mateo, if Cliff is truly his father." "He is." Nora remembered Cliff's face at the gala, not surprise but recognition. "Then, legally, the trust can't activate until Cliff acknowledges him publicly. Your great-grandfather made it bulletproof, almost like he knew this day would come." A knock interrupted them. Eli entered with Layla, carrying brown paper bags. "Thought you might forget to eat," he said, setting sandwiches on the table's corner. "Ham and Swiss from Miller's Deli," Layla announced. "Dad says you like mustard, not mayo." The simple kindness made Nora's throat tight. "Thank you, both of you." While they ate, Nora and Janice explained their findings. Eli listened carefully, asking occasional questions. Layla, meanwhile, studied the old notebooks with the prototype designs. "These are falling apart," she observed, holding up a page where the binding had cracked. "One flood or fire and they're gone." "We've got copies in the safety deposit box," Eli said. "But are they complete and searchable?" Layla pulled out her phone. "There's apps now that can scan and index everything. Make it so you can search for any word or drawing." Janice looked impressed. "She's right. We should digitize everything immediately. Create multiple backups." "I can help tonight," Layla offered. "After homework." "That's kind, sweetheart, but," Nora began. "Please? This matters. Dad always says we should use our gifts to help others." Eli smiled softly at his daughter. "Just until 9. School tomorrow." They finished lunch discussing logistics, which documents to prioritize, how to organize the digital files. When Eli and Layla left, Janice leaned back. "That man cares about you. He cares about the mill, the workers. He brought you sandwiches. With mustard, not mayo. Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks. We should focus on the trust documents. Janice smiled but returned to the papers. That evening, Nora's office became a scanning station. She'd borrowed 3 scanners from different departments, setting them up in an efficient line. Layla sat cross-legged on the floor, organizing pages, while Nora fed them through machines. The repetitive work felt meditative. "Mom would have liked you," Layla said suddenly. Nora's hands stilled. "What makes you say that?" Dad says you fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Mom was like that. She was a nurse, helped people nobody else wanted to help. She sounds wonderful. I was 7 when she died. Remember her reading to me. Her voice was soft, like yours when you hum. Nora hadn't realized she'd been humming. An old hymn from childhood, something about morning mercies. Sorry, don't stop. It's nice. They worked on, Nora humming softly, while pages became pixels, history transformed into safeguarded future. Across town, Cliff Caldwell sat in his mahogany-paneled study. The bourbon in his crystal tumbler had gone warm, untouched. On his desk lay a photograph, the only one he'd kept. Marisol, young and radiant, holding infant Mateo. He'd taken it himself, in secret, the one time she'd let him visit after the birth. The boy had his eyes. Anyone could see it now that they knew to look. His phone buzzed. Victor Hale again, pushing for tomorrow's board vote on the buyout. Cliff deleted the message without responding. 17 years of denial. 17 years of watching from afar as Mateo grew into a remarkable young man, honor student, talented musician. Everything Cliff had once hoped for in a son. The study door cracked open. His wife peered in. "Coming to bed?" "Soon." She left without pressing. Their marriage had become this polite distance, separate bedrooms, maintaining appearances. She'd known about Mateo for years, had chosen expensive silence over messy truth. Cliff picked up his phone, started to dial Nora, stopped, started again, stopped. The bourbon beckoned, but he pushed it away. He needed clarity, not numbness. In the small apartment above her mother's restaurant, Marisol knelt beside her bed. Mateo knelt with her, their hands clasped. "Forgive me," she whispered in Spanish, "for the lie, for the burden I put on him. You were protecting me, Mama. I was protecting myself too, my pride, my shame. God knows our hearts." She squeezed his hands. "You're so much better than either of your parents. Don't let our failures limit your future. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." They prayed then, not for specific outcomes, but for strength, for wisdom, for mercy to flow like water through the cracks of their broken story. The quality control lab erupted in cheers. Workers crowded around the testing station where the prototype fabric had just passed every metric: tensile strength, color fastness, shrinkage resistance. Better numbers than anything Caldwell Mills had produced in decades. Stronger than military spec, the lab tech announced, holding up the test results. And 30% cheaper to produce. Word spread through the plant like wildfire. Workers who'd been counting days until layoffs suddenly talked about overtime schedules. The lunchroom buzzed with possibility. Eli found Nora in the pilot production area, watching the prototype loom hum along smoothly. "Just got a call," he said, unable to hide his grin. "The Veterans Uniform Coalition wants a site visit. Next week." "You're joking." They saw our sustainability report. Plus, someone forwarded them Pastor Ruth's video about the community impact plan. Nora gripped the railing, steadying herself. A contract with the VUC could save everything: hundreds of jobs, the trust activation, Mateo's scholarship, everything. "We need to prepare, make sure the whole line is running perfectly. Already on it, the crew's staying late voluntarily. Nobody wants to mess this up." That evening, the church fellowship hall glowed with warmth. Pastor Ruth had organized what she called a little celebration dinner, which in church terms meant enough fried chicken to feed an army. Tables groaned under cornbread, green beans, mac and cheese, and 3 kinds of pie. "Sit, sit," Pastor Ruth commanded, guiding Nora to a seat. "You've been running yourself ragged." Eli appeared with 2 plates, sliding one in front of Nora before taking the chair beside her. Their knees bumped under the table. Neither moved away. "Mama Lou's recipe," he said, indicating the chicken. "She'll be offended if you don't try it." Around them, families laughed and talked. Workers who'd been tense for months now smiled freely. Children ran between tables, their voices bright as bells. Someone started humming, "How Great Thou Art," and soon half the room joined in, harmonies weaving together like fabric through a loom. "Never seen anything like this," Nora said softly. "What's that?" "Community. Real community. Not just proximity, but connection." Eli's hand found hers under the table, a brief squeeze. "You helped build this." "No, it was already here. I just opened a door." The fellowship hall door swung open. Cliff Caldwell stood in the entrance, overdressed in his tailored suit, uncertainty written across his face. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Pastor Ruth rose smoothly. "Cliff, welcome. There's plenty of food." He nodded stiffly, scanning the room until his eyes found Nora. She met him halfway, steering him to a quieter corner near the coffee station. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to." He cleared his throat. "The board meets tomorrow." "I know. I'm going to do it. Acknowledge Mateo. Publicly." Nora searched his face. "Why now?" "Because it's right. Because that boy deserves better than my cowardice. Because," his voice cracked, "because I'm tired of living a lie." "What about your wife? Your reputation?" "Margaret knows. Has known for years. As for reputation," he laughed bitterly. "What good is reputation built on deception? The other board members won't like it. Then they can vote me out. But first I'll vote to activate the trust." Nora felt her eyes burn. "Cliff, don't. Just tell Marisol. Tell her I'm going to make it right, as much as I can." She found Marisol in the kitchen, washing dishes despite protests from the church ladies. Nora drew her aside, whispering the news. Marisol's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling instantly. "He said that? Truly?" "Tomorrow, at the board meeting." Marisol sank onto a stool, shoulders shaking. 17 years I've carried this. It's almost over." "No." Marisol wiped her eyes. "It's just beginning, but beginning right this time." They returned to find the fellowship hall transformed into an impromptu concert. Mateo sat at the old upright piano, playing hymns while people sang. His fingers moved with practiced grace, drawing out melodies that made even the simplest songs sound profound. Cliff stood in the back, watching his son with naked longing. When Mateo transitioned into a classical piece, something complex and beautiful, Cliff's composure finally cracked. He turned away, but not before Nora saw tears on his cheeks. The evening wound down slowly, nobody wanting it to end. Children played tag in the churchyard, while adults lingered over coffee and pie. Eli's daughter, Layla, had recruited several kids to help her diagram the prototype loom's mechanics in sidewalk chalk. "Your daughter's brilliant," Nora told Eli. "Takes after her mother and her father." They stood close in the evening air, watching Layla explain gear ratios to fascinated 8-year-olds. The moment felt suspended, precious. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Eli said quietly, "you've already changed things, given people hope. We've changed things. Together." A child's laughter rang across the yard, pure and unrestrained. Tomorrow would bring battles, board votes, legal challenges, hard truths. But tonight, in this space of fellowship and faith, victory already hummed in the air. The church bells chimed 9 o'clock, gentle as a blessing. The sirens started at 4:47 a.m., slicing through the pre-dawn quiet like scissors through silk. Nora jolted awake, phone already ringing. The night watchman's voice came through, panicked and breathless. "Fire! West Wing the prototype!" She dressed in yesterday's clothes, racing through empty streets toward the orange glow painting the horizon. The mill's west wing belched black smoke into the lightening sky. Fire trucks crowded the lot, hoses snaking across asphalt. "Eli!" She spotted him near the entrance. Layla pressed against his side. The girl's face was streaked with soot, her breathing ragged. "We came early." Eli's voice was hoarse. "Wanted to check the tension settings before the morning shift." Layla insisted on helping. A coughing fit seized his daughter. Eli swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the paramedics. Nora followed, heart hammering. "She went back," Eli said, anguish clear. "Tried to save the notebooks. I barely got her out." The paramedic fitted an oxygen mask over Layla's face. The girl's eyes, wide above the plastic, fixed on the burning building. Tears cut clean tracks through the ash on her cheeks. "The loom," she whispered through the mask. "All our work. By 7, the fire was contained, but the damage was done." The prototype room stood gutted, machinery twisted into abstract sculpture. Water dripped from blackened beams. The smell of melted plastic and charred wood hung thick. Fire Chief Morrison pulled Nora aside. "Accelerant traces near the electrical panel. This wasn't an accident." "You're saying arson? We'll need a full investigation. The notebooks." Nora ran to her office, feet splashing through puddles of fire-suppressant foam. The door hung open. Her desk drawers were pulled out, emptied. The prototype plans, the founder's notebooks, her copied pages, gone. "Looking for these?" Victor Hale stood in the doorway, immaculate despite the chaos. Shame about the fire. Without documentation, proving that prototype existed becomes rather difficult. Careful with accusations, Ms. Caldwell. Slander suits are expensive." His smile was cold as winter marble. "The buyout offer stands, for now." Reporters arrived with the morning shift, cameras capturing workers' stunned faces. Microphones thrust at anyone who'd talk. Will Caldwell Mills accept the buyout now? Can the company survive without the prototype? Is it true the CEO was suspended? That last one was news to Nora. She found confirmation at the emergency board meeting that afternoon. Cliff sat silent while other members voted. Suspension pending investigation, effective immediately. "This is ridiculous," she protested. "The fire was arson, which happened under your watch," Board Member Harrison interrupted. "After you insisted on pursuing this risky prototype scheme. The trust, without documentation, there is no trust." Victor, attending as a concerned investor, spread his hands. "Perhaps it's time for fresh leadership." Nora looked to Cliff. He stared at the table, jaw clenched but mouth closed. When the vote was called, he abstained. It was enough. She was out. Security escorted her to collect personal items. The workers watched, some crying openly. She wanted to tell them it wasn't over, that she'd fight this. But the words died in her throat. How could she fight without proof? Without position? Evening found her at home, staring at unemployment forms she couldn't focus on. Her phone rang. Eli. "They're here." His voice was tight with controlled panic. "Child Protective Services." "What?" "Someone reported Layla's smoke exposure. Said I endangered her by bringing her to an unsafe work environment." Nora grabbed her keys, but Eli stopped her. "Don't. It'll make things worse. They're already questioning why the CEO was at my house for dinner." Someone's been talking. Through the phone she heard official voices, Layla's confused questions, Eli's forced calm responses. The visit lasted an hour. An eternity. "They're opening a case," Eli said after. "Home visits, interviews, if they find cause." He couldn't finish. "We'll fight this." "With what?" "You've been suspended. I'll probably be fired tomorrow. We've got no proof, no prototype, no... We have truth. Truth." His laugh was bitter. "Truth doesn't matter when power writes the story." After they hung up, Nora sat in her dark kitchen, hands shaking. Everything they'd built, everything they'd hoped, reduced to ash in a single morning. The trust would remain locked. Workers would lose jobs. Mateo would lose his chance at acknowledgement. Layla might lose her father. She thought of the yellow door, how she'd pushed it open despite Eli's warning. Had her curiosity caused all this? Her determination to drag secrets into light? Her phone buzzed. A text from Pastor Ruth. Joy comes in the morning, but first, we endure the night. Nora stared at her empty desk, laptop gone, papers removed. The magnitude of what they faced crashed over her. Victor had played this perfectly: destroy the evidence, discredit the leadership, threaten what people loved most. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Outside, a mockingbird sang its stolen songs, and darkness settled over the town like a shroud. The gravel crunched under Nora's tires as she pulled into Eli's driveway. His house sat modest and neat, yellow porch light cutting through the darkness. She'd driven without thinking, drawn here by instinct more than plan. Eli sat on the front steps, head in his hands. He looked up at her approach, managed half a smile. Couldn't sleep either? Not a chance. She settled beside him, the wood creaking under their combined weight. How's Layla? Finally dozed off an hour ago, kept asking if she did something wrong. Before Nora could respond, headlights swept the drive. Pastor Ruth's old sedan parked beside Nora's car. The pastor emerged with a thermos and a paper bag, Marisol climbing out the passenger side. Figured you two wouldn't be sleeping, Ruth said, ascending the steps with surprising grace for her age. Coffee and Ruth's famous stress cookies. Marisol hung back, uncertainty written across her face. I shouldn't be here. I've caused enough trouble. Nonsense. Ruth patted the step. Trouble started long before you spoke truth. They arranged themselves on the porch, Ruth in the single rocking chair, the others on the steps. The coffee was strong, bitter, perfect. For a while, nobody spoke. Crickets filled the silence. I've ruined everything, Marisol finally whispered. If I hadn't told Mateo, if he hadn't said anything at the gala, the mill would still be failing, Nora interrupted gently. The workers would still be underpaid. The truth would still be locked behind that yellow door. Truth. Eli's laugh held no humor. Look where truth got us. You're suspended. I might lose Layla. The prototypes destroyed. The notebooks are gone, Nora added, staring into her coffee. Without documentation, we can't prove anything. Not the trust, not the founder's intentions, nothing. Ruth rocked slowly, wood groaning in rhythm. You know what I told the youth group last Sunday? Peter walked on water until he looked at the waves instead of Jesus. All respect, Pastor, but we're drowning here, Eli said. Are you? Or are you just now seeing the waves that were always there? Marisol wrapped her arms around herself. Cliff won't acknowledge Mateo now. Not after the fire, the investigation. He'll deny everything. My cousin's always been a coward, Nora said. But I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd grown a conscience. Conscience is a luxury for people with power, Eli muttered. Ruth stopped rocking. That's where you're wrong, Eli Brooks. Conscience is what gives power its purpose. Without it, power is just violence dressed in a suit. Pretty words don't rebuild burned looms or restore stolen documents. No. But they remind us why we fight. Ruth pulled her shawl tighter. Mercy is a door that opens both ways. You showed mercy by protecting that room all these years, Eli. Nora showed mercy by listening to workers' stories. Marisol showed mercy by carrying her burden alone so long. And where did mercy get us? Eli's voice cracked. Here. Together. Still breathing. The screen door creaked. Layla stood there in her nightgown, dragging her grandmother's quilt. Her face was puffy from sleep and crying. Daddy? Hey, baby girl, you should be sleeping. She shuffled out, the quilt trailing behind her like a cape. Couldn't. Too many thoughts. Eli pulled her onto his lap. She was getting big for it, all knees and elbows, but neither seemed to care. The quilt wrapped around them both. Ms. Nora, are you really fired? Layla asked. Suspended. It's complicated. Because of the fire? Because some people want us to stop fighting for what's right, Ruth said. Layla considered this, fingers tracing the quilt's pattern. Remember what you told me about doors, Daddy? How God doesn't close one without opening another? That's different, baby. Is it? She looked up at him with eyes older than 12. The yellow door opened and showed us truth. The fire door closed, but maybe, she yawned. Maybe there's another door we haven't found yet. From the mouths of babes, Ruth murmured. Layla snuggled deeper into Eli's arms. It'll be okay, Daddy. God doesn't close doors for nothing. Within minutes, her breathing deepened into sleep. Eli held her like she might disappear, this child who was his whole world. She's right, you know, Ruth said, about doors. Sometimes we're so focused on the one that closed, we miss the one cracking open. What door? Nora asked. We have nothing, no proof, no leverage, no. No? Ruth smiled. You have a community that watched you listen, workers who saw you try, a child who believes in justice. That's not nothing. Marisol wiped her eyes. Mateo wants to withdraw from school. Says he's brought shame on everyone. Only shame here is grown folks letting fear win, Ruth said firmly. They sat in silence again, each lost in thought. The mill's silhouette rose against the moon, dark and wounded but still standing. Nora stared at it. This building that held so much history, so much pain, so much possibility. I won't let it die, she said suddenly. The others turned to her. The mill. The trust. The truth. I won't let Victor Hale and his kind win. Her voice gained strength. There has to be something we missed. Some proof that survived. Even if there is, Eli said carefully, not wanting to wake Layla, you have no position, no authority. Then we fight without it. Ruth's right power without conscience is just violence. Well, conscience without power is still conscience. Ruth smiled. Now you're talking. The moon climbed higher, casting silver over the small gathering. Tomorrow would bring more battles, more threats. But tonight, on this porch, surrounded by broken people who refused to break completely, something stirred. Hope, maybe, or just stubbornness. Either way, it was enough to begin. The morning sun cast long shadows through the truck's windshield as Eli drove toward First Baptist. Nora sat beside him, Pastor Ruth in the back, all three quiet with the weight of what they hoped to find. Storm season, Eli said suddenly. Hurricane warnings last September. You remember, Pastor? Course I do. Had the whole congregation moving valuables to higher ground. That's when I copied those notebook pages. Figured if the mill flooded. He gripped the wheel tighter. Never thought I'd need them for this. The church parking lot was empty except for a maintenance van. They walked through the side door, footsteps echoing in the hallway lined with children's Sunday school artwork, construction paper arcs, and cotton ball sheep. Ruth's office smelled of lemon oil and old hymn books. She moved aside a painting of Jesus with the little children, revealing the safe built into the wall. Nobody knows about this except the deacons and me, she said, spinning the combination. And now you. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, among collection records and property deeds, sat a manila folder labeled Caldwell Mill, September Storm Prep. Eli's hands trembled as he pulled it out. I only had time to copy maybe 20 pages. Might not be enough. He stopped. Behind the folder was an envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with wax. Written across it in fading ink, to the right Caldwell. Lord have mercy, Ruth whispered. That wasn't there in September, Eli said. I would have seen it. My predecessor, Pastor Williams, he must have placed it there before he passed. Told me everything important was in that safe, but I never. Ruth touched the envelope reverently. Open it, Nora. Nora's fingers shook as she broke the seal. Inside were several pages of legal text and a handwritten letter. She scanned the codicil first, her accountant's eye catching the key phrases. It's all here, she breathed. Legal language confirming the trust. Requirements for implementation. Her voice caught, including public acknowledgement of every child bearing Caldwell blood, irrespective of station or skin. Skin? Eli asked. Nora kept reading. There's more. References to children, not just unacknowledged but specifically excluded due to. She looked up. The founder knew. He knew there would be mixed-race heirs. He was planning for it. Ruth sank into her desk chair, making provision for sins he saw coming, or ones that had already happened, Nora said quietly. This codicil is dated 1963. The civil rights movement was, I know what it was, Eli said sharply. My father lived it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, no, I'm just processing. Eli rubbed his face. All this time, the old man was trying to make it right. In his own complicated way, Nora found the handwritten letter beneath the legal pages. Should I read it? Yes, Ruth said. Witnesses matter. Nora's voice was steady but soft. To the Caldwell who opens this door, not the door to this envelope, but the door to truth. If you are reading this, you have already shown courage. The mill was built on cotton and compromise, on progress and prejudice. I have made money from both nobility and sin. The trust is my attempt at redemption, though I know money cannot buy back souls or years. There will be children born to this family who cannot claim their name. Law and custom forbid it now, but law and custom change. When they do, the Caldwell who leads must choose, preserve the lie of our pure legacy or embrace the mixed truth of who we are. The prototype in the Mercy Room runs on innovation, but the trust runs on acknowledgement. You cannot have one without the other. The future of Caldwell Mills depends not on hiding our failures, but on confessing them. Mercy is not weakness. It is the only strength that lasts. May God forgive what I could not fix in my lifetime. May you be braver than I was. The letter was signed Josiah Caldwell, 1963. Nora set the paper down, tears streaming. He knew. Even then, he knew what this family would become, what we'd do, what Cliff did. Eli corrected gently. Cliff's not the first. Won't be the last. Nora wiped her face. But maybe we can stop the pattern. They photocopied everything twice, one set for Janice Wu, one for the board meeting. Ruth returned the originals to the safe. Legal dynamite, she said, handle with prayer. That evening they gathered at Eli's house. Layla had made spaghetti, only thing I can cook without burning, and they ate off mismatched plates while Nora read the founder's letter aloud again. He sounds sad, Layla said, twirling her fork. I think he was, Nora replied, but he tried to fix it. That's something, right? That's everything, baby girl, Eli said. Layla yawned, fighting sleep. Ms. Nora, will you really show that letter to everyone, even though it makes your family look bad? Especially because of that. That's brave. Or foolish. Daddy says they're sometimes the same thing. Eli chuckled. When did I say that? When you were fixing the roof during that thunderstorm. They laughed, the sound warming the small kitchen. Layla's eyes drooped, and she slumped against the table. Someone's done, Eli said, starting to rise. Let me, Nora said. She lifted Layla carefully, surprised by how light the girl was. Layla mumbled something about doors and angels as Nora carried her to her room. The walls were covered with science fair ribbons and pictures of her late mother. Nora tucked the quilt around the sleeping child, brushing curls from her forehead. Through the window, the mill's silhouette stood against the stars. Family, Nora thought, wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was just people who refused to let you fall alone. She returned to find Eli washing dishes, Ruth drying. Thank you, she said to both of them, for everything. Battle's not won yet, Ruth warned. No. But at least now, we have ammunition. And each other, Eli added quietly. They stood together in his small kitchen, three unlikely allies bound by truth and necessity. Tomorrow would bring the board meeting, Cliff's reckoning, and either salvation or ruin. But tonight, with Layla safe and sleeping, With proof in hand and purpose renewed, it was enough. The mercy door was opening wider. The boardroom smelled of old wood and fresh coffee, morning light slanting through tall windows that hadn't been cleaned in years. Nora arrived early, finding workers already gathered in the hallway, their faces pressed to the glass doors. Word had spread overnight something big was happening. "Let them in," she told security. "They have a right to witness this." Janice Wu arranged papers at the long mahogany table, her movements precise as a surgeon's. The backup notebooks lay open, pages marked with yellow tabs. The codicil rested in a clear protective sleeve, waiting. Board members trickled in, avoiding eye contact with the workers who lined the back wall. These were men who'd spent careers keeping the two worlds, separate boardroom and factory floor, decision-makers and laborers. Having them in the same room felt like mixing oil and water. Victor Hale entered with his usual swagger, designer suit impeccable. "Quite the audience, Nora. Planning a show?" "Just transparency, Victor. That's a dangerous game in business. Maybe that's been the problem." Cliff arrived last. His usual polish was gone, shirt wrinkled, tie crooked, shadows under his eyes deep as bruises. He took his chairman's seat without greeting anyone, staring at his hands folded on the table. "Shall we begin?" Old Sam Crawford wheezed from his corner seat. At 82, he'd served on the board longer than anyone. "Some of us aren't getting younger." Nora stood. "Thank you all for coming. I know there's been speculation about recent events, the fire, my suspension, various rumors. Today we're setting the record straight." "You're suspended," Victor interrupted. "You shouldn't even be here." "The suspension was pending investigation," Janice said smoothly. "Which has concluded. The fire was arson, traced to a contractor with ties to outside interests." Her gaze fixed on Victor. "Very specific outside interests." Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Furthermore," Janice continued, "we've recovered crucial documents that survived the fire. Documents that change everything." She lifted the codicil. "This is Josiah Caldwell's legal codicil to the Founders Promise Trust, dated 1963, properly witnessed and notarized. It explicitly states that the trust, currently valued at $43 million, activates only when, and I quote, all children of Caldwell blood are publicly acknowledged, regardless of the circumstances of their birth, the color of their skin, or the station of their mother." The room went silent. Workers shifted against the wall. Cliff's breathing grew audible. "That's ancient history," Victor said. "Unenforceable after 60 years. Actually, trust law is quite clear on perpetual instructions," Janice replied, "especially when tied to specific conditions that haven't yet been met." The boardroom door opened. Pastor Ruth entered, followed by Marisol and Mateo. Marisol wore her best dress, navy blue, ironed sharp. Mateo stood tall beside her, 17 years old, but carrying himself with dignity beyond his years. "What is this?" Sam Crawford sputtered. "The condition that hasn't been met," Nora said softly. Every eye turned to Cliff. He sat frozen, staring at Mateo with an expression of pure anguish. The boy looked back steadily, neither accusing nor forgiving. Just waiting. "Cliff," Nora said, "it's time." "This is ridiculous," Victor stood. "You can't seriously expect—" "Sit down, Victor." Cliff's voice cracked like a whip. "Just sit down." Victor sat. Cliff rose slowly, gripping the table edge. His gaze never left Mateo's face. "I've practiced this speech 100 times, had all the right words lined up. But looking at you now—" His voice broke. "God help me, you look just like my father." Marisol made a small sound, her hand flying to her mouth. 17 years ago I was a coward. I chose my reputation over responsibility. I chose the easy lie over the hard truth." Cliff's hands shook. "Mateo Reyes is my son. I've known it every day for 17 years, every birthday I missed, every school concert I didn't attend, every time I passed Marisol in my house and pretended not to see the boy who has my father's eyes and my mother's nose. Tears ran down Marisol's cheeks. Mateo reached for her hand. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Cliff continued. "I haven't earned it. But before this board, before these witnesses, I acknowledge what I should have claimed years ago. Mateo is my son, my blood, my responsibility that I failed." The room held its breath. "The trust is activated," Janice announced. "Effective immediately, funding becomes available for the reforms outlined in the founders' documents. Wage equity adjustments, the scholarship program, the Sustainable Fabric Initiative." "This is insane," Victor exploded. "You're destroying shareholder value for some bleeding heart fantasy." "We're saving the company," Nora said. "The veterans' contract alone will triple our revenue. The Sustainable Fabric cuts costs by 30%. And the workforce that actually believes in their company? That's invaluable. I'm calling an emergency shareholder meeting. This board has lost its mind." "Go ahead," Cliff said quietly. "But you should know I'm voting my shares with Nora. All 43%. Victor's face went purple. "You can't." "I can. I will. And it's done." Cliff looked at the workers lining the wall. "We've taken from you for generations, hidden behind legal structures and corporate veils. But the old man saw it coming. He knew the debt would come due." His gaze returned to Mateo. "All debts come due." Victor stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Sam Crawford cleared his throat. "Well, that was unexpected." "I move to reinstate Nora as CEO." "Seconded," said three voices simultaneously. "All in favor?" Every hand rose except one. Cliff abstained, too overwhelmed to vote. The workers erupted, not into chaos but into applause that rolled like thunder through the old boardroom. Some were crying, others hugged. The mill's boardroom, that temple of separation and secrecy, rang with the sound of barriers breaking. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, catching the dust motes that danced like celebration confetti. Nora stood in that light, feeling its warmth on her face, and knew that everything had changed. The door wasn't just open now. It had been removed from its hinges. The church bells rang at 3 o'clock, calling the town to witness what many thought impossible. Workers streamed from the mill, still wearing their uniforms. Shop owners flipped their signs to closed and hurried down Main Street. By the time Pastor Ruth stepped to the pulpit, every pew was packed, with people standing along the walls and spilling into the aisles. "Before we begin," Pastor Ruth said, her voice carrying to the furthest corner, "let's remember why we're here. Not for gossip, not for scandal, but for truth and reconciliation. Let's start with Amazing Grace." The organ swelled. Hundreds of voices rose together, some steady, others trembling with emotion. Nora stood in the front row between Eli and Layla, her hands shaking slightly as she held the hymnal. Behind them, Cliff sat with Marisol and Mateo the first time anyone had seen them together publicly. When the last note faded, Pastor Ruth nodded to Nora. The walk to the pulpit felt endless. Nora gripped her notes, though she knew she wouldn't need them. The words had been burning in her chest since morning. "The Caldwell family built this mill a century ago," she began. "It brought jobs, prosperity, and purpose to our town. But it also carried shadows, unfair wages, discrimination, and promises broken." She paused, meeting the eyes of the older workers. "Today, those shadows end." She explained the Founders Promise Trust simply, without corporate jargon. Wage audits would begin immediately, with back pay for historical inequities, 20 full scholarships each year for workers' children and grandchildren, 2 permanent board seats for elected worker representatives, plus 1 for a community member. "This isn't charity," Nora said firmly. "This is justice delayed but not denied." An elderly woman in the third row began crying. She'd worked the mills for 40 years, paid half what her male counterparts earned. Her daughter wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Furthermore," Nora continued, "the Sustainable Fabric process will launch fully next month. Every current employee keeps their job. We're hiring 30 more. and profit sharing begins with the next quarter. The sanctuary erupted. Not the polite applause of the boardroom, but raw, emotional celebration. Someone shouted, "Hallelujah!" Others wept openly. Cliff stood abruptly. The celebration quieted as he made his way forward. His usual commanding presence had crumbled, leaving a man who looked older than his 62 years. "I need to say something." His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I've been a coward and a hypocrite. I preached family values while denying my own son. I talked about Christian charity while allowing discrimination under my watch." He turned to face Marisol and Mateo directly. "Marisol, you deserved better. You deserved respect, support, and acknowledgement. Instead, I gave you silence and shame. I'm sorry." Those words aren't enough, but they're a start. His gaze shifted to Mateo. "Son," the word hung in the air, foreign on his tongue. "I missed 17 years. Your first words, first steps, every baseball game and concert. I can't get that back. But if you'll let me, I want to try. Not to be the father you deserved, but maybe to become the father you might still need." Mateo stood slowly. The congregation held its breath. The teenager walked forward, violin case in hand. Without a word, he opened it and tucked the instrument under his chin. The first notes of "How Great Thou Art" filled the sanctuary. Pure, clear, and achingly beautiful. By the second verse, voices joined in, tentative at first, then stronger. Cliff's shoulders shook as he sang through tears. Marisol's voice rose clear and true. The whole church sang as one body, one voice, one moment of grace. When the hymn ended, Mateo lowered his violin. "Mom always said forgiveness is a door we open from the inside. I'm opening mine." Cliff pulled his son into an embrace that's 17 years overdue. The church erupted again, this time in tears and amens and grateful prayers. As the gathering dissolved into smaller groups, neighbors hugging, workers planning, families celebrating, Nora found herself walking out with Eli. Layla had run ahead with friends, leaving them alone in the golden afternoon light. "You did it," Eli said softly. "We did it. Couldn't have happened without that key you kept safe." They walked slowly, neither eager to part. The sidewalk stretched before them, dappled with shadows from the oak trees. Other congregants passed, nodding and smiling, but giving them space. "Feels different," Eli said. "The whole town, like something heavy just lifted." "Second chances," Nora murmured. "The founder knew we'd need them, built them right into the trust's structure. Everyone needs second chances." He glanced at her. "Even CEOs who've been carrying too much alone." They reached his gate, white picket paint peeling at the corners. Layla's bicycle leaned against the porch. Through the window, they could see her at the kitchen table, already working on homework. "Thank you," Nora said, "for believing this could work, for standing with me when the board pushed back." "For..." She trailed off. "For what?" "For reminding me that opening doors, even scary ones, can lead to good things." They stood at the gate, neither moving to open it. The space between them hummed with possibility, with futures not yet spoken but beginning to take shape. His hand moved slightly, as if to reach for hers, then stopped. "Nora, I know," she said softly. "One door at a time." He smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "But maybe, coffee tomorrow, after the morning shift meeting? I'd like that." She walked away slowly, feeling his gaze follow her. At the corner, she turned back. He was still there, watching, the afternoon sun painting gold across his face. They shared a look that held promises of tomorrows, of possibilities, of doors yet to open. The morning news conference took place on the mill's front steps. Detective Marcus Hayes, a veteran investigator with 30 years under his belt, faced the cameras with grim satisfaction. The fire at Caldwell Mills was deliberate sabotage. He held up evidence bags containing electrical components. We've traced accelerants and modified wiring to contractors employed by Hale Industries. Bank records show payments from Victor Hale's personal accounts to these individuals 2 days before the fire. Reporters shouted questions. Hayes raised his hand for silence. Mr. Hale was arrested this morning at his hotel. He's being charged with arson, conspiracy to commit fraud, and reckless endangerment of a minor. The last charge made Nora's stomach clench. Layla could have died in that smoke. Within an hour, the story exploded across every network. Corporate raiders' scheme exposed. Buyout built on ashes. Hale Industries under federal investigation. The mill's boardroom filled for an emergency session. This time, no one challenged Nora's right to be there. I moved to reinstate Nora Caldwell as CEO, effective immediately. Cliff's voice carried new humility. All in favor? Every hand rose. No hesitation. I also moved to promote Eli Brooks to Director of Operations, with full benefits and a seat at our planning sessions. Again, unanimous approval. Nora accepted with grace, though her hands trembled slightly. We have work to do. Good work. Honest work. Across town, Eli sat in a bright office at Child Protective Services. The investigator, Mrs. Chen, smiled as she closed his file. Mr. Brooks, not only are we clearing you of any concerns, we're commending you. Your quick thinking during the fire, getting Layla and other workers out safely, showed exceptional parenting and leadership. Just did what any father would do. No, Mrs. Chen said firmly. You did more. We've had several calls from community members praising how you balance work and fatherhood. Your daughter is lucky to have you. Eli drove home feeling lighter than he had in days. Layla waited on the porch, homework abandoned, and flew into his arms when he shared the news. By afternoon, the mill hummed with new energy. Workers who'd stayed home during the chaos returned. The burned section was cordoned off, but the main floor operated at full capacity. Conversations buzzed with hope instead of fear. Marisol arrived with her cleaning crew, moving through familiar hallways with unfamiliar peace. When she passed Cliff's office, he'd moved to a smaller space. Giving the corner suite to Nora, he called out, Marisol, could we talk? She entered cautiously. Mr. Caldwell? Cliff, please. I wanted you to know Mateo's college fund is established. Full ride, any school he chooses. And your position here is permanent, with a raise backdated 5 years. That's generous. It's overdue and insufficient, but it's a start. She nodded, not trusting her voice. 17 years of fear had loosened its grip, but trust would take time. As the sun lowered, trucks pulled into the mill yard. Grills appeared. Picnic tables materialized from the church. Someone strung lights between the loading dock posts. The celebration had been Layla's idea, organized by Pastor Ruth, and embraced by everyone who needed to mark this moment. The smell of barbecue drew workers and families from across town. Children ran between tables while adults filled plates with pulled pork, cornbread, and coleslaw. The church ladies had outdone themselves with pies, pecan, sweet potato, chess, and apple. Nora stood with Eli near the main entrance, watching the transformation. The mill yard, usually all business and diesel fumes, bloomed with community. Never seen it like this, Eli said. The founder would have loved it. All these people, all these families, together. Pastor Ruth approached with 2 plates. You two need to eat. Can't run on hope alone. They accepted gratefully. The food tasted like victory and relief, and second chances all mixed together. Mateo sat up near the loading dock with his violin and a few friends with guitars. Music drifted across the yard, hymns mixing with folk songs, old ballads with newer melodies. Workers who hadn't spoken in years shared tables. Black and white, young and old, management and floor workers, all boundaries softened in the twilight. Cliff sat with Marisol and Mateo, awkward but trying. They didn't look like a family yet, but perhaps like people who might become one. Dad's actually not bad at guitar, Mateo told his mother, surprising everyone, including Cliff. "You play?" Marisol asked. "Used to. Been years." Mateo jogged to his friend's truck and returned with a worn acoustic guitar. "Show us." Cliff's fingers found familiar chords. Soon he was playing along with his son, tentative harmonies growing stronger with each verse. Marisol watched them, her guarded expression softening incrementally. As full dark settled, Layla organized the younger kids in catching fireflies. Their laughter rang across the yard like bells. Nora noticed Eli watching his daughter with quiet pride. "She's remarkable," Nora said. "Takes after her mother that way." Angela would have loved this, seeing the mill become what it was meant to be. "Tell me about her." They found a quieter spot, and Eli shared memories of his late wife, her laugh, her fierce advocacy for workers' rights, her belief that companies should serve communities, not the other way around. "She would have liked you," he said finally. "Would have said you've got backbone." The evening wound down slowly, nobody eager to break the spell. Tomorrow would bring challenges, rebuilding the burned section, launching the new fabric line, implementing fair wages. But tonight was for gratitude. 3 weeks after the fire, the rebuilt West Wing hummed with purpose. Workers gathered around the restored prototype line, watching the first yards of sustainable fabric emerge. The material gleamed under the fluorescent lights, stronger, softer, and produced with half the water and chemicals of traditional methods. "That's it," Layla called from her spot near the quality control station where she'd been helping document the process for her science fair project. "That's exactly the tensile strength we calculated." Eli ran his hand along the fabric, checking for consistency. Around him, workers who'd spent decades at traditional looms marveled at the efficiency. Sarah Martinez, who'd worked the floor for 30 years, shook her head in wonder. All this time, this was just sitting behind that yellow door. "Waiting for the right moment," Eli said. "The right person to find it." Nora entered with representatives from the Veterans Administration, their uniforms crisp despite the southern heat. Colonel Davidson examined the fabric samples, running them through his fingers. "This exceeds every specification. Durability, comfort, cost efficiency. It's remarkable. Our workers deserve the credit," Nora said. "They've adapted the founder's design and improved it. Then we're ready to sign. 3-year contract with options to extend." Cheers erupted across the floor. Workers hugged, some crying. For many, it meant the difference between keeping their homes and losing them. That afternoon, maintenance installed a new bulletin board in the main hallway, glass-fronted and lit, impossible to ignore. Janice Wu posted the wage equity adjustments, each position listed with its new rate. Groups clustered around it, voices rising in disbelief. "That can't be right," Tom Bradley said, pointing at his listing. "That's a 40% increase." "It's right," Janice confirmed. "Retroactive 2 months, as promised." Margaret Chen, who'd cleaned offices for 15 years, pressed her hand to her mouth. Her new wage matched what entry-level supervisors had been making. "I can finally fix my roof, maybe even help my daughter with nursing school." Across the hall, in what used to be a storage room, Pastor Ruth had helped establish the Founders Promise Trust office. Simple desks, donated computers, and filing cabinets filled the space. But the certificates stacked on the main table transformed it into something special. 20 full scholarships this year, Ruth announced to the gathered families. Trade schools, community colleges, 4-year universities, wherever our young people's talents lead them. The scholarship ceremony took place in the mill's main conference room, windows thrown open to let in the afternoon breeze. Families packed the space, some standing along the walls. Mateo sat in the front row, his mother beside him, both wearing their Sunday best. "Our first recipient," Ruth began, "exemplifies what this trust represents. Talent that might have gone unrecognized. Promise that deserves support." She called Mateo forward. The room erupted in applause. He walked to the front, his usual quiet confidence momentarily overwhelmed by the moment. Cliff stood from his seat on the board panel, certificate in hand. Mateo Reyes. Cliff's voice caught. He cleared his throat and continued. The Founders Promise Trust awards you full tuition to pursue music education at the college of your choice. Father and son faced each other, 17 years of absence hanging between them. Then Cliff did what he should have done years ago. He opened his arms. Mateo stepped into the embrace, tentative at first, then holding tight. Cliff's tears fell freely. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "I'm sorry it took so long to say it." Marisol wiped her eyes, finally seeing the beginning of what she'd hoped for, but never dared expect. Layla, sitting with her father, bounced in her seat as each scholarship was announced. These were her classmates, her friends from science club, kids she'd grown up with. When Tommy Washington received a welding apprenticeship scholarship, she cheered loudest of all. "His dad got laid off last year," she whispered to Eli. "This changes everything for them." The ceremony continued. Nursing scholarships, engineering programs, teaching certificates. Each one a door opening, a future secured. Nora stood at the side, watching families celebrate. Her own family's money had opened every door for her, but she'd never seen joy like this. That evening, after the families had gone home and the mill had quieted, Nora found Eli in the Mercy room. He stood among the restored equipment, checking calibrations for tomorrow's production run. "Quite a day," she said. "Never thought I'd see it. All those kids getting their chance. You helped make it possible. If you hadn't protected this room all those years." "Just did what the founder asked." He adjusted a gauge, then turned to face her. "Though I did try to warn you about that door," she laughed. "You did. Don't open that door, you said." Very ominous. Meant it too. Knew it would change everything. Opening it was the best decision I ever made. They stood in comfortable silence, surrounded by the soft tick of cooling metal and the distant hum of the night shift beginning work. "Thank you," Eli said finally, "for believing in the workers, for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away, for believing in me. You're the one who showed me what this place could be. Not just a mill, but a community, a family, even." Through the window, they could see the lights of town, the church steeple, the school, houses where mill workers were sitting down to dinners they could now afford. 6 months after the trust activation, workers gathered in the parking lot, watching trucks deliver the final pieces for the Mercy Room transformation. Glass display cases, proper lighting, benches carved from reclaimed millwood, everything carefully chosen to honor both past and future. Inside, Eli supervised the installation of the restored prototype loom, now behind protective barriers, but still functional for demonstrations. "Careful with that thread guide," he called to the movers. "That's 100 years of history you're handling." The walls had become a living testament. Quilts hung in neat rows, each one telling its own story. Margaret Chen's square showed cleaning supplies transformed into flowers. Tommy Washington's father had embroidered a wrench, becoming a diploma. Some patches held simple names and dates, workers long gone, but not forgotten. "My grandmother would have loved this," said Betty Morrison, touching a square that bore her grandmother's initials. "She worked here 53 years, never got promoted, but she kept this place running." The dedication ceremony drew everyone. Cars lined the streets for blocks. The high school band warmed up outside while inside, folding chairs filled every available space. The morning sun cast long beams through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like celebration confetti. Pastor Ruth stood at the makeshift podium, her voice carrying to the overflow crowd, listening through open doors. "We gather today not to forget the past, but to transform it. This room, once locked away, now stands open. What was hidden in shame now shines in truth." The crowd murmured agreement. In the front row, Cliff sat straighter than he had in months, Mateo beside him. They'd been meeting weekly awkward dinners, becoming easier conversations, silence giving way to stories. Mateo's hand rested on his violin case, ready for his part in the program. Marisol sat on Mateo's other side, wearing the new dress she'd bought with her first equity-adjusted paycheck. Her fingers intertwined with her son's, both protective and proud. The weight she'd carried for 17 years had finally lifted. "Before we continue," Ruth said, "let's acknowledge those whose courage brought us here." Nora Caldwell, who opened the door despite warnings. Applause filled the room. Nora, standing near the wall, ducked her head but smiled. Eli Brooks, who kept faith with a promise made decades ago. More applause. Eli shifted uncomfortably, never one for spotlight, but Layla grabbed his hand and raised it high. "And all of you," Ruth continued, "who stayed through hard times, who kept working when hope seemed lost, who believed this mill could be more than profit margins and production quotas." The ceremony continued with speeches from the mayor, the school superintendent, even a message from the state governor. But the moment that silenced everyone came when Mateo stood with his violin. "This piece," he said quietly into the microphone, "was written by a mill worker in 1924. He never got credit, never got paid for it. But my teacher found it in the archives." He positioned his violin. "It's called Threads of Hope." The melody started soft, almost mournful, echoing the struggles embedded in the mill's history. Then it grew, adding complexity and strength until the final notes soared with triumph. When he finished, the silence lasted 3 heartbeats before thunderous applause erupted. Cliff stood first, tears streaming openly. He pulled Mateo into an embrace, whispering something that made the boy smile. Marisol watched her 2 men finally, properly, her 2 men, and felt her heart complete itself. "Now," Pastor Ruth announced, "Miss Layla Brooks will lead our first official tour." Layla bounced to the front, wearing her best dress and her science club medal. "Follow me, please. And don't touch the displays yet. We'll have hands-on demonstrations later." She led a group of school children through the exhibits, explaining the loom's mechanics with the confidence of someone 3 times her age. "See this part? My dad says it's like the mill's brain. It remembers patterns and makes them better." Nora and Eli stood together, watching Layla work. Their shoulders nearly touched, a closeness that had developed slowly over long months of dawn meetings and evening walks. "She's a natural teacher," Nora said. "Gets that from her mother. Sarah would have been so proud. She'd be proud of you too, what you've built here. We built it, together." The dedication concluded with everyone gathering in the main room. Pastor Ruth raised her hand for attention. "Let's close with Amazing Grace. And I mean everyone, no hiding in the back pretending you don't know the words." The hymn began softly, older voices leading the way. Then younger ones joined, harmonies weaving together like threads on the loom. The sound filled the mercy room, spilling through open doors into the mill proper, where second-shift workers paused to listen. Nora leaned toward Eli, her voice just above a whisper. "Some doors were never meant to stay shut." He nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. The founder knew. Just had to wait for the right person brave enough to open it. Brave or foolish? Maybe both. Best things usually are. The hymn swelled, voices lifting higher. Through the windows, the rest of the mill stretched out, machines humming with purpose, workers earning fair wages, young people training for futures previously impossible. The crowd sang louder, filling the mercy room with hope. All those voices, black and white, young and old, management and labor, joined in harmony. The mill's redemption was complete, its future secure, its doors finally, properly, permanently open. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.